And good morning, and sorry for that shameless plug, but I want to welcome you all here to this workshop on discussing of digital marketing. I appreciate this very much. First off, I'm gonna let you know that this is being recorded right now, so that when this finishes, I will post this on my YouTube channel so that you could view it again in case there's anything that you would like to go over. Let me also say this, is that if at any time you would like to message me or stop or anything like that, either unmute your mic, please interrupt me at any time, because I tend to move along, and I will even stay on longer if you wish me, if there's any particular piece of conversation that you would like for me to extend further. So you can either chat with a text message, or you can chat, just say, excuse me, Dave, and that's all you need to do. So without further ado, let me go and at least start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Okay, so first off, let me introduce myself. My name is David Shows. It's spelled like shows, S-H-O-W-S, pronounced like cows. Okay, so you just call me Dave or David, that's fine with me. I'm originally from a little town in Mississippi called Long Beach. Long Beach is on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. It was originally incorporated in 1905. People have lived there since D'Iberville explored that area when he was busy, and Iberville was exploring the Mississippi River at that point. So people have been around the Gulf Coast, not as long as you have certainly been here, but we've been along for a while. The big difference, of course, being from Mississippi on the Gulf Coast versus here is, instead of being 3,300 feet up in the air, where we were in Long Beach, I was 25 feet above sea level, and that's if I stood on the pine straw in the backyard. So anyway, I'm a small town guy. I love small towns. I'm enormously happy being here, and I am available at any time if you need any kind of advice or any kind of discussion. All right. Okay. So without further ado, let me kind of explain what we're going to do here. I'm going to start out by talking about digital marketing doing the 50,000 feet up kind of scenario. And so we're going to talk about advertising in general, and then we're going to start breaking it down to where digital marketing fits into that as well, so that you get an overall kind of complete idea of the entire environment in which digital marketing lives. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about is, what is advertising? Okay, it sounds simple, we all think we know, but I like to come up with definitions with my students because I like us all to be able to be on the same wavelength. Excuse me. So what advertising is basically communication. We're trying to communicate to our customers the value that our particular product has, and hopefully find some way of exchanging that value for our consumers' purchase. But to be effective, we need to have more than one way of communicating. We need to use more than just simply billboard advertising or radio advertising. We need also to be able to sell in our offices. We need to be able to promote as well. And we need not only to use those, but the new ones such as social media. And the important thing is that we need to have a concentration of force. We need to integrate all of those things together. And so we no longer in marketing call it advertising, we call it integrated marketing communications, because in its depth, that is truly what it is. It is the integrated marketing communications with one voice doing it in different platforms, all right? So just remember, everything a company says or does is a form of marketing communication, everything that it does. And generally that communication does one of four things. It informs the consumer about new goods and new services. It reminds our consumer how to continue to use the brands that we have to a certain amount of satisfaction. It persuades consumers to be able to choose one brand over another. And then finally, what we hope to do is we hope to build friendships and we hope to build relationships with our customers. And so with that, we classify our communications in three ways. Excuse me, folks. I apologize. Okay, so everyone joining in, thank you. I also wanted to say to those individuals, for those individuals who are just joining in, welcome. And I also wanted to say that this particular item is being recorded, and I will be posting this on my YouTube channel in the afternoon sometime so that you'll be able to review it as well. I also, but while I'm doing this also, I wanted to say as well that at any time afterwards, if you wish, if you have anything else further, please email me. My email address is showsgd, showsgd@appstate.edu. All right. Okay, so moving along, in those four ways that marketing hopes to be able to communicate in one way or another, we classify all communication strata in three ways, all right? The first strata is the one that we all know about, which is the traditional method that is called the one-to-many model, all right? And so the one-to-many model basically is a single marketing message, an individual, unique single message that is sent to millions of people all at once at the same time. And these would be considered the traditional forms of marketing, advertising, sales promotions, public relations. The same message uses different kinds of vehicles in which to be able to send that particular message. And then based upon the media itself, the media is crafted to use those particular advantages. And so television is a visual medium. And so you use television to both describe and be able to show. Radio, of course, is theater of the mind. Sales promotions generally are on flyers. Billboard advertisements need immediate messages of 5 seconds or less, but in essence, the same message is there, but it's being crafted for many, many more individuals. The disadvantage, of course, to the one-to-many model is that it's not crafted for each individual user. And one of the things, especially in the last 3 decades of marketing of what we understand, is that consumers are not one single unit that all have a common way in which they react. Marketing shows us that groups are in segments, they're in unique individual groups, and being able to sell to those individual groups in a unique way is ultimately where success is. Maybe one day I'll talk about segmentation, targeting, and positioning, which is the heart of marketing, but you get what I mean here. So this is the one-to-many model. The next is personal communication, which is known as the one-to-one model. And so we think of this as one individual for our corporation talking to another individual, the consumer, on a very personal one-to-one level. And so if we were looking at this, we're talking about direct marketing, where a corporation talks individually to a customer. We're also talking about personal selling as well, where the personal seller has the ability to overcome objections at that particular point. Personal selling is still number one when it comes to being able to work with consumers. It is the most expensive, no doubt about it. And you don't have some of the control over the message, but personal selling is still one of the finest ways that we can reach to a consumer. The last one, the one that we're talking about now when we talk about digital marketing, is the many-to-many model, all right? And so in the many-to-many model, what we're doing is many consumers are talking to many others, and we're talking beyond just the corporation itself in which is exchanging the product, but the consumers themselves are talking to each other. And so this was the start of the concept of groundswell, which is a social trend where people use technology to get things from each other, rather than going to the traditional institutions or the corporations. And we find now that consumers are getting their information on running shoes, anything you want to say, from one another, rather than going to the original source. And so this is the brave new world of where digital marketing is and social media is as well. So how did this happen? How did this come about in the last 20 years? There's a great marketing guru by the name of Jag Sheth, a great guy. I love Jag. And one of the things that Jag Sheth in one of his writings talked about in marketing is that marketing is context driven. And the context is always being set by our consumers. And in many ways, marketing must be reactive as well as active as well. And so the things that has created the digital marketing world have not come from the marketers. We'd love to say we're that smart. No, it's coming from our consumers. And so we look at three major changes which has brought this up. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me also say this as well. What makes the many-to-many model so important, so dangerous, and so wonderful is this particular line right here. So if you look at this line here and it says the extent of marketers' control over communication, you look at the basic advertising, the one-to-many model, if you notice, you have the highest amount of control over that communication. Yet you have the lowest consumer trust in the message. And we all know this. I mean, in 1978, when I was an undergraduate Southern Miss, Dr. Smith in advertising said, "Let us put to bed forever the concept of the helpless consumer." And I think that carries through, especially now when there's so many different venues to be able to get information. Advertising just simply is the lowest in consumer trust. Whereas if you look at the other end of the spectrum, the highest consumer trust is in word of mouth, which is also the many model, but it is the one that we as advertisers have the least control over. And so this is the world as it is now, and these are the situations in which we need to know how to handle. Any questions so far? Anything? All right, I'm plowing ahead. For those individuals, we had somebody enter. I wanted to say that I am recording this so that after this, I will post where you can find this discussion on YouTube. Okay, so how did it start? Well, there were three things that happened in the last 20 years. The internet basically has been around since 1967, if you want to be very honest about it, but it really didn't take off until 1992. And believe it or not, that's when the government stopped putting money into the internet and let the internet sink or swim on its own. And of course, you know, human and personal capital went into the internet and it exploded. And we went from CompuServe and AOL to the internet as we know it now. But if you look at the timeline of the internet as it existed before 2002, we call that internet or web 1.0. I was an internet, I ran an ISP, I created one in 1999. And so this is what the world was like before. The internet consisted mainly of static sites that resulted in basically a one-way flow of communication. Well, we find that after 2002, in the IT world, we have the discussion of what became Web 2.0. And what 2.0 basically meant is that individuals, people themselves started posting their own web pages. So if any of you can remember that far back when you first got an internet account, one of the things that you also had is the room to put your own personal web pages. So you might have put up stuff about Beanie Babies. You might have put up stuff about here's my vacation. You started to see bloggers come into attention. The bloggers got attention from other people that did the same things they did, like traveling. And before you knew it, you saw this whole new conflagration, this fascinating new brave world of the Web 2.0, where the information was provided by the users as the contributors. And so you found corporations like Martha Stewart, who were flummoxed by this, who basically controlled content in 1992 to 94 when she was coming up with her recipes. Now, all of a sudden, bloggers were getting together and they were exchanging their own recipes. And so it was a strange, brave new world for many companies. So that's the first step. The next step that came along, click on Dave, excuse me. My mouse is not working. Step 2 is the birth of the smartphone. Now, the smartphone, the components started to come around 2002, 2003. You started to see what we would call disruptive technologies start to come about. And so what you had is the wedding, the connection of two unique technologies that would come together to create this new unique item that had never been seen before. And so you found that the cell phone, because it was using a cellular connection, they were using CDMA and TDMA technologies, were actually similar or close enough so that you could actually use it with the internet as well. And so you saw very rudimentary connections with the internet starting at 2003, 2004. And then you started to see the fusion of the internet and the phone, and then the camera, because the camera was critical, because what it did was consumers could exchange pictures with each other. You had all of these things together, and in 2006, you had the birth of the smartphone. Now, the first smartphone was developed by Nokia, and if you notice the picture of the Nokia phone, the official version of what a smartphone ultimately was going to be was one of those things that was in a great state of flux. They didn't really know ultimately what it was going to be. Well, when iPhone came out in 2007, what you had was the finalized format of the smartphone. It's a very important moment in mobile technology, just as much as the IBM PC was a very important moment in personal computers. It's standardized an interface regardless of whatever operating system you had or applications you had on it. And they became what you would consider to be certain minimum standards. It had a camera, it had memory, it had cellular connection, it had an internet connection, it had all of those things together. And so what you had now is not only did you have a communication device on the internet, but you had a communication device you could carry anywhere. And that was awesome. Finally, step 3 was with this device that you could carry anywhere, that you had all of the ways that you can go anywhere. It meant also that you could carry this particular device while you're shopping, and it meant that you had the birth of what's known as the Omnichannel. And so the Omnichannel was this way of you being able to find out information about goods that you're looking at in a retail outlet and find out information about it before you ever left the store. You saw the concept in 2011, 2013, especially affecting companies like Best Buy in the concept of what is known as showrooming. Many of you, I'm sure, have had showrooming, may be to your detriment. Showrooming is when consumers come in, look at your goods, and they look at that item online and try to find it for a lower price. It almost wrecked Best Buy. Best Buy was able to handle that quite simply by price matching. it should be noted also now that 70% of a buyer's journey, which means from the identification of a need ultimately to a purchase, 70% of that journey now is completed before the buyer ever reaches out for a sale. Now, for you, those of you in retail with the omnichannel, I want you to know that all is not lost, and I'll talk to you more about it. But quite simply, to give you an example, 45% of all electronics are bought online, but 2/3 of the individuals who buy electronics online go into a store to see it before they actually purchase it. So realize this, 2/3 of the individuals who are buying online are in your stores looking at your goods. And so you have that opportunity to get that consumer before they ever leave the store. And so what you had now is that the omnichannel meant that you had the smartphones, you had big data, which meant all of this information that was being generated about consumers coming in and going out. It meant that consumers could look up this information from their other sources out there, find out how well this item is or not. And then, of course, the last thing that kind of weds it together is social media. Okay. So how do I talk about social media and be able to understand where it came from initially? Well, I do a lot of research. I like browsing through internet, and I like to browse on old newspapers. And I wanted to show you this. For many of you who are my age or older, you know what this is. This is the personal sections of every newspaper. And so you have these little conversations that go on about Orme Berry has visited Ruth Lane. You have this some person who's going to work at Ingalls Shipyard. Ruby Hobson has returned from visiting Arizona with friends. And this is what social media was. My grandmother used to say, Dave, there's nothing new under the sun. And in many ways, that's what social media is. All that social media really is doing the same thing using a different format. And so if you think of Web 2.0 and social media, it's the internet version of neighbors talking across the fence. And in that form, if you understand that, you'll understand how to advertise on social media and how not to. So here's an example. You know, do you like the new store? Not bad. People are nice there. That's the kind of things that you would generally say to an individual in a general form of conversation. And this is what the internet is. But the problem is that everybody is saying things to everybody. And this is social media at its best and its worst. And this is why you have these gigantic trends of things that happen at some time that blow up as we see them, for good, bad, or for ill, is quite simply is that everybody is talking to everybody, which is great or not so great. And it just depends on whatever they're saying is good or bad. Here is the key. If you're advertising and you're trying to use social media, the problem is that advertisers in social media try to use the media like the one-to-many model. So what that means is that you can't say that there's a big sale at Bill's department store, because you wouldn't say that to your neighbor next door. You wouldn't advertise to your neighbor just like breaking up in the middle of a conversation. It doesn't work. So the way to use social media to your success is to remember the authentic and the informative message. All right. And so you advertise to your consumer, not in an advertising way. And so an example here is that Bill will open early for the Blue Ridge Bikers. And so that would be a considered message that you could carry to your consumers. And then even you could say something effective, if you show up early, you get the same discounts. That's the way that you would do it. All of this lends itself to a unique form of advertisement that has come about since social media that is known as native advertising. And so I don't know if you've heard of this concept before, but I'm going to explain what it is. Native advertising is the telling of a story that engages the consumer in a way that wishes them to know more and provides them valuable information as an interactive narrator. And the advertisement is not distinct as an advertisement. I did this discussion with, Blue Ridge Energy. And one of the things that I talked to them about social media and native advertisement is what an enormous story that they have. Just think about the electrification of the Appalachians and what a great story that was and what it did for all of the consumers in the 30s when that happened. It's a wonderful story. And if I'm going to do anything to discuss what Blue Ridge, the value that it brings, Blue Ridge Energy, I'm going to tell that story. I'm going to tell you what you did for the community out there, and it will lead to many, many other things. It's just sort of like us talking, and that's an example. In social media, success is not in trying to advertise, because remember, folks, you know this, you ignore advertisements, all right? But if you use it to inform, you've got something. If you can use your social media to inform, then you have your consumers' attention. Tell them about your history. Tell them the success of using your product. Let them know of what you've done or given to others, you know, when there's a contest, but don't sell. And you're selling, folks, it's not the way I mean it, but you're selling, but you're using the medium to its maximum advantage. So I like to throw in this little blurb here just to give you an example of how to use it. So in 1928, along the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, they built a seawall to protect against hurricanes. Works sometimes, works doesn't. But during the dedication of the seawall, none other than Johnny Weissmuller came, who was an Olympian swimmer, for those of you who aren't sure. He was Tarzan in the Tarzan movies. And here he is. This is in Long Beach, where I'm at, where I'm from, in front of Gulf Park College at the dedication. And so you could use this as a way of talking about the history of Gulf Park College and how it connects to its commitment to individuals. And so this is an example of a native advertising content using social media. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, what's the most effective way to spend your advertising dollars? Because all of you are business people and you're needing to be able to grab clients. So what I'm going to talk about in a general way in discussion of advertising, and then I'm going to talk about how to use it in individual medias. So the first thing you need to do is you need to build the narrative, the story. Remember your history in relationship to the area's history that you're in. Discuss the value that you have brought to your community by being in business. And what you're doing is you're building what we call the brand image. It's a heuristic, a rule of thumb about thinking of you. And in traditional media, you'll use the traditional methods to focus on that. But remember that in social media, you use it in a different way. You still use the same message. You use it to encourage involvement. You can run studies to gain more information. And remember, entertain as well. It isn't all just, you know, all just have to be grim. I'm sure many of you have read the very interesting things that, oh gosh, Wendy's has come up on their social media platforms. I mean, I find them to be hilarious, and I find them to be very effective as well. And so now we're talking about crafting a message, and we're using different ways in which we can effectively use those platforms. But I also talked about value. So how do you think about value in your mind when you're trying to create this message for consumers? Think about your consumers. Put an idea of them in your mind. Think of your average consumers and think about, how do you serve them? You know, do you give them the lowest prices, or do you have a unique benefit? And if you think along those lines, you help to craft the message. And remember that your brand, your corporation, is a mental rule of thumb. It represents you all in one image. And so you want to craft a simple one that's remembered and one that can't be forgotten. And so that's the way that you start to build a concept of who you are and create the campaign. So just remember this also, and this is extremely important as well. Social media is a dynamic two-way street. It means that when you post something on social media, it's not just simply enough to sit back and wait to see what happens, that you need to interact with the customers. And let me also say this, social media is just one facet of digital marketing, and we'll talk about the rest of those later. We've been hovering at 50,000 feet. We're about to get a lot closer to the earth. And remember this, is that marketing communication is the integrated use of communication, the concentrated use of force, following a message. But remember, like each part of a car, each medium functions differently. And so let's talk about, we've talked about social media as one facet of digital marketing. Now I'm going to break out of these and start showing you a couple of things. So I work with a company I still keep in business with. It's called Friday Night Under the Lights. It is a high school football show in Mississippi. I've been doing it for 20 years. When I created the internet service providership, we were the first Friday night scoreboard show in Mississippi that was online. We started it in 2001. And one of the things that was important to us is to be able, when individuals would search on search engines, that they be able to find us. So there's two concepts that you need to understand. One of them is called search engine optimization. And this is where you improve your standing on a search engine like Google or DuckDuckGo. It's important, I don't know if you know this at all, but you can tweak the odds yourself that you will be found on Google. I don't know if you know this, but you as a corporation can go into Google, input your own business, and in essence, add yourself into those engines without the engines having to find you first. Now, the next is what's called search engine marketing. And that's where instead of you just doing it, you pay someone else to increase your visibility. So do I want to show them? Yeah, I'll show them. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. All right. Excuse me for just a second. Oh, wait, let's see, is this it? Excuse me, folks. I've got a lot of things posted here, if you notice. I have been spreading my wings, so to speak. Let's see. Let me do it this way. I'll show it to you. So, DuckDuckGo. So the company that I use, Friday Night Under the Lights, all right, I have, if you know it, Friday Night Under the Lights is, Friday Night Lights was a movie, and it's used quite a bit. It means anything dealing with hot Friday night football. Now, if you notice, as soon as I went into Friday Night Under the Lights, guess what? Little bitty Friday Night Under the Lights in Mississippi comes up first. Why? Well, because what I did was I went into the settings and I set up DuckDuckGo so that it would deliberately bubble my name up to the first. Now, if you look, there's Friday Night Under the Lights in several other places. Starkville. If you notice, I have another channel here for No Live. You've got U-Flag Under the Lights powered by Under Armour. So you see that, and this gives you an example of search engine optimization. Search engine marketing, okay, is something different. And so I don't pay Google because that's too much money. But there are other companies that do. And so do you remember that this one was like fifth? Now they're first. Why? Because they spend the cash on Google so that Google gets them up first. Now, I still beat them. If you notice in the videos, there I am, Friday Night Under the Lights, Mississippi Public Broadcasting. We work with MPB, by the way. And so what you see here is an example of search engine marketing. Because they spent the money necessary in order to advertise themselves, these groups got ahead of us. Now, we're in the images, all right? We're better than that. You notice that there's lots of different things that say Friday night under the lights. Why? Because this is what search engine marketing does. You pay the search engines and they make sure you're at the top. Now, do you want to spend that much money? It's up to you. All right. I think if I'm not mistaken, you can spend a lot of money. Let me see if I've actually, forgive me, just a second. I want to see. Yes, I do. Hold on. I wanted to show you this. I'm glad I found it. If I were to try to spend a lot of money on search engine marketing, this give you an idea of how much you could spend a month. Now, you know, that's a lot of money. Okay, there's no doubt about it. But you yourself, with the right individuals helping you through search engine optimization, can find yourself in the same locations I did. And it's all about being able to know how to effectively do it. Okay, there's two ways you do it. You do it inside the website itself. There's what's called meta tags, and I can certainly discuss it with you at a future time with that. When you set up the websites, if you have a good programmer, the meta tags are what help. And the second thing is spending the time plugging yourself into the search engines so that you're number one. Okay, so in digital marketing, that's search engine optimization, search engine marketing. Okay. Moving on. Are there any questions, by the way? Forgive me, I'm just rolling. If any of you wish to say anything at all, please, you know, stop me, slam the brakes on. Okay. So going back and talking about our original was, so we talked about you can still use email for your traditional marketing techniques. And I shouldn't take email out of the loop, but realize is that email, as far as a traditional advertising, is not essentially effective, but it should be used more for what are known as sales promotions. So what's the difference between advertising and sales promotion? In the definition, in the strictest sense, a sales promotion is a special deal in which you wish consumers to move within a certain, you know, particular length of time. Sales promotions are generally limited by a time period. Sometimes there's an inducement to get you to buy early. Sales promotions, as a rule of thumb, are not effective when it comes to trying to change brand loyalty, because consumers are loyal to their particular things, all right? But it can be an effective technique when you're using it for sales promotions. So remember also that social media is more for native advertising. And just remember that the blending the messages in a personal story is the most effective way of selling, all right? Now, you're probably asking yourself at this point, let's get it in the dollars and cents, and how much is the difference between like advertising on Facebook and advertising, say, at a billboard advertisement. So I looked it up, and it depends on the type of billboard advertisement that you might be looking at. So remember this, is that billboards are 5-second exposures. They're very effective. Don't get me wrong. I have advertised on billboards and done very well. Billboard advertisements can be as little as $250 a month, even up to $2,000. And in areas, of course, like Charlotte, it could be up to $15,000 a month. Now, now going with that, how does it work with Facebook? Do I want to show them? Yes, I do. So I advertise in Facebook for Friday night under the lights. And so I'm going to show you my personal Facebook website. Okay. So this is Friday night under the lights. This is my controlling panel. And this is where I go to do all of my posting. Now, there's two ways that you can advertise on Facebook. One way is just to simply make a post and have that post just be simply shared or not. And that's how it depends. And so this is the playoff, the semifinal round where I posted all of the final scores. If you noticed, I reached 204 people. I got 2 engagements, which means that they shared that with other individuals. It's important also to understand that when we're talking about high school playoffs, generally what happens is your peak time is in October when everybody's favorites teams are in. And when the playoff happens, when you've got fewer and fewer teams, generally things start bottoming, or not bottoming out, but just slow down a little bit, okay? So this is a panel. If you were on Facebook and you wanted to be able to drive, it could tell you how well you were doing. Now, what if I wanted to spend money and I had particular things that I wanted to spend money on? So here is one of those that I did do it on. All right. And this is, once again, a native advertisement, and it's what's called the Little Brown Jug. So in Mississippi, the Little Brown Jug is a traditional event between Laurel High School and Hattiesburg High School. They're 25 miles apart. And what this is a native advertisement talking about the history of the Little Brown Jug. And so what you're looking at is, there it is with all of the, all of the dates on it. And this was the 101st anniversary of the Little Brown Jug game. And so if you notice here, the first thing that I'm doing is that I'm talking about the Little Brown Jug. And if you want to find out more, you've got to click on this and it takes you to my website where I talk about the Little Brown Jug more. So what I'm doing though, is I'm driving people for advertisements so that the traffic increases more and more. So this is how I do it. So I talk about the history of it, where it came from, and then I also do links to other websites as well. All of that drives traffic, okay? So if you notice here, I reached 2.6 thousand people. I had 330 post engagements, which meant basically that I had more individuals interacting. With all of that, the discussion would run into, how much did I spend? Well, my reach was 2,622. I spent $1 a day. I spent $14 over 14 days. It cost me 4 cents an engagement. And then here's the other thing that you get, which is really one of the wonderful things about digital advertisement. I find out exactly my demographics of the individuals who I was able to interact with, okay? So I chose in this, I chose to be able to get as close to a particular group as I could. I wanted to engage individuals who are in the Mississippi high school football, and it cost me $14, all right? So that's an example of how much it can be. Now, what if I wanted to spend more? So let me give you an example. So here are some of the campaigns that I have done. So this one is a post that I did, and this was on, excuse me, it's a post on Greenville Christian High School. So in the pandemic in Mississippi, all of the Jackson area schools had to close, or not to close, but they canceled football, where there were a dozen or 24 students who were on their way to major colleges who had nowhere to play. And so Greenville Christian said, come on, you can come play with us. And so this is an example of the story. And so if you look down here, I spent $70. And if you noticed, I engaged 10,803 individuals. Of that, 2,000 were organic. In other words, they spread by other people, saying, hey, you got to look at this. And then 8,939 came directly from the advertisement. I had 12 shares. I had 16 comments, 887 reactions. All of this basically gives you an idea of the effectiveness of advertisement and ultimately, how you're able to successfully drive traffic using Facebook. I can do the same thing in using other platforms, but I find Facebook to be the most immediate. And so in terms of maximizing dollars, I've used it before. And if you notice, I spent $70. My reach was great. And it interacted with my group. And ultimately, it was wildly successful. So ultimately, in the long run, what I'm hoping to do is I want consumers, I want people to be driven to this website and to be able to say that they interact with and they see Friday Night Under the Lights, because this is ultimately what I'm hoping to find success is. I want people to be driven to my website, particularly because if you see this advertisement right here for Malone, they're one of our primary advertisers.
Malone exists to improve our community for a better today. Nothing brings communities together like Friday night football under the lights. And nobody tells their stories like the Oneto Group. For roofing, metal walls, and maintenance, Malone Roofing Services has you covered.
That advertisement played 4,832 times in October. And so it gives you an idea of the traffic that you can drive to your websites to be able to view a particular message. And it's been very successful for us. So if you notice the Mississippi-Alabama All-Star game, my interview with John Reed McClendon, I put the playoff brackets up, the history of the little bag, all of these things are interactions, are ways of being able to generate traffic and interest to our consumers. And so this is an example. This gives you two things. It gives you an example of how to drive traffic using Facebook. And then also it gives you a comparative cost analysis when you're looking at something like billboard advertising. We'll talk about this later when I kind of wrap this up in the end. But one of the advantages, especially with working with digital media, is that the buy-in cost is cheap. All right. It all comes down to effort. And if you've got the effort, you can do a lot, believe me. Okay, so back to it. Now, I also wanted to say another thing that's part of digital marketing is what's called influencer marketing. So one of the ways that you can attract consumers to your particular, your websites or to where you want to go is to become an influencer. And so what's an influencer? They're individuals that have a level of expertise and have a social influence as well. And by social, I mean interacting with consumers. And they can affect the buying process because of their experience and knowledge. So this is YouTube right down here. And this is an example of a guy by the name of Scotty Kilmer. Scotty Kilmer is a mechanic. He has a high school education. Scotty Kilmer. So if you have 1 million subscribers on YouTube, 1 million subscribers makes you about $65,000 to $70,000 a year. Scotty Kilmer has 4.7 million subscribers. All right. Now, you don't need to think that you're ever going to get like that, but it just, the power of a guy like Scotty Kilmer who talks about things is enormously strong. Okay. And so I'm just going to play just a brief clip on this. I hope it's not too loud or too overbearing, but this is the kind of thing that Scotty does.
Well, since Ford's jumped on the electric vehicle foray, they have a radical idea. It's not out there yet, but they want to make charging super fast. And here's what their plan is. It's not just making more charging stations, but it's making them faster. Ford researchers are working on a charging system is intercooled so it doesn't overheat when it's
I won't go any further than that. I love Scotty. He does two videos a day. You don't have to do that. I have my own YouTube channel. I have 330 individuals on it. I generally give marketing advice and I talk about chapters in marketing as well. Influencer marketing, each one of you can be an influencer. each one of you can create a YouTube channel that gives you or gives your consumers an idea of your own personal knowledge. Now, of course, how do you retain your own personal power? Well, you do that by not giving away everything. Okay. You know, if you're wanting to draw consumers in, you can talk about what happens to, just an example, if you're an automobile dealership, talk about what happens in the fall when you change temperatures. What are the effects to your automobile? You know, those would be how you could couple those things together. But this is in essence of what influencer marketing is. This is another thing in digital marketing, once again, that you yourself can do. And it's a very powerful thing as well. So we talk about social media, search engine optimization, search engine marketing, influencer marketing. All of these basically are connections with what we consider to be digital marketing. So the last couple of things are, I talked about before, is the omni-channel, and I'm going to talk about it again. And I'm also going to talk about buy online, pick up in store. So the omni-channel, as I talked about, all started from this little device that every one of us has, okay? We all have a mobile phone. And what this mobile device, this mobile internet device does is it allows us to research, buy, and even do everything, including arranging delivery, all from a single phone. Now, one of the things that the omni-channel is different from multi-channels, and what I mean by that is that, you know, picking up in the store, getting it delivered, is that the multi-channel is what we call siloed. And so in other words, what it means is that they're not integrated together. It's like they exist all by themselves. The omni-channel brings you a seamless experience. And it's the #1 trend in retail and channels over the last decade. Now, do we like omni? Well, the difficulty with the omni channels is that you have what's called cross-channel interference. And so what it means is that consumers will start on one channel and they'll end on another channel. And sometimes in the mix, it makes it difficult to know exactly where you're making your money from. Do the consumers buy it online? Do they get it in the store? It's difficult, but we want it. The reason why is that the consumers who do cross-channel purchasing buy more, all right? So the consumer who only shops retail or the consumer who only shops online doesn't generate for you as much money as the consumer who buys online and picks up in the store. Now, a trend that was started once again totally by consumers is where you purchase the item online, you do everything, and all you do is you go in the store and pick up the good. Now, I've said that it generates more revenue, but the difficulty with buy online, pick up in store is that you generally generate, or it costs the store 10 to 15% more because of the labor of pulling those goods off the shelf and then stacking them somewhere for the consumer to pick up. But they're in your store. They're coming to buy from you. And so what you have to think of it in this way is that your consumers are guaranteed to come in. And so the answer to buy online, pick up in store is give them a reason to buy more. Perhaps when they come in, give them a 5% discount on anything they purchase right then. That would be an example of being able to maximize the amount of revenue that you have from every consumer interaction. And once again, I want to stress finally on both of these. I could spend hours on omni-channel and buy online, pick up in store. These are things that consumers themselves have done. So no matter what you might read from anyone else, these are trends that were generated by consumers themselves. And so if we're good marketers, what we're trying to do is we're trying to pick up on these things and run with them as quickly as we can. So wrapping this up, what are the benefits of digital marketing? So with all of this, where do we go? So we have several advantages for digital marketing. The first is we have a global reach. Now, it may not matter to you, especially if you're just selling down the corner, But for many of you who have especially unique particular items that you're selling, perhaps even a reach just outside of the county, perhaps a reach into Myrtle Beach, perhaps a reach into Tennessee, maybe that you have that ability to extend wherever the internet is, that in essence increases your trade area. In essence, online, your trade area doesn't exist. It's anywhere. The next is if I showed you, is that entering into digital marketing can be inexpensive. Now the cost can grow, but the cost can grow as your income grows as well. And so you can get into this digital marketing fairly inexpensively. One of the other great things about digital marketing, if you remember when I showed you that on Facebook, is you get a real visible idea of how effective your marketing is. You understand who you've connected to exactly and how you can go about making better decisions based upon better information. And unlike the one-to-many, you can zero exactly on your target market is. When I was in Facebook, I could have tweaked it much more. I only tweaked Mississippi football people. I could have tweaked it much more and gone after an even deeper group. One of the other things about digital marketing is you can change on a dime, all right? It's flexible. Instead of investing months in traditional media, buying 3 to 4 months in advance, when I did billboard advertising, generally the contract was for a month. If I'm doing radio, it's probably a month to month as well. And of course, TV, it can be even more than that. With digital media or digital marketing, you can change all of that in a moment's notice. And then the last thing about it, and which is an important thing, especially when you consider social media, is that you interact with your customers on their terms. That's important. You connect with them where they are, not necessarily where you are. They don't have to come to you. You can go to them, but you don't have to leave your desk, okay? You have a shared experience with those consumers online. You can meet them face-to-face equally. And that is extremely important and a great selling point. It generates a shared experience, and we know that a shared experience leads to greater loyalty. So there's the molasses. What's the sulfur? The problem is with digital marketing, the biggest concern is a lack of sincerity and authenticity, all right? Just remember the digital marketing consumers have all the tools at their side. They have all of the ability to be able to know whether or not they're being treated falsely or not. And if they're being treated falsely, they can spread that to others as well. Digital marketing requires zero manipulation. And by that, you don't manipulate consumers. You don't have small print that has extenuating circumstances. You avoid the things like bait and switch. You just remember the slide that I showed you, that you have the least control of the message. And so remember, it's the one that the consumers have the greatest trust in or lack, all right? The other final thing just to remember is that that consumers are being constantly bombarded, that consumers have their own walls, their own cones of silence, that they have ways of disconnecting themselves, being incognito so that they can protect their internet viewing from you. And so you have to be careful about being lost in the pack. You need to craft your message to your market segment as intimately as you possibly can. And then just remember this, is that most influencer marketing, most of these messages are crafted not by people. They're crafted by an algorithm, by a computer. If you want to connect with consumers, you need to be human, all right? And so just remember this, interact with consumers in a personal way. And this most insensitive medium of it all can be a very personal way of connecting with your consumers. Okay. So Are there any questions that anyone, I'm afraid, forgive me, I went through that fairly fast, but I wanted to be able to stack everything in. I know that you're all busy individuals. Is there any questions or anything I can answer right now? Okay, well, folks, I hope I answered some of your questions about what digital marketing is. It is a brave new world, folks. We are right now creating a digital marketing class so that the class will be generated for professional education, so that we'll talk about how to be able to create and craft a digital campaign and be able to understand in the campaign itself whether there is success or whether there is failure, because that's the most important thing, to be able to look at the numbers and know what the numbers mean. That's going to be one of the things that we will create from this digital marketing class. Just remember, folks, coordinate and communicate. Create a single message. Make the message about you. Yes, I have a chat. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, April. That is what I'm here for. You just made my day. I appreciate it. I am open and available for any questions or any of these other things that you wished for me to state. I am thrilled that you allowed me to speak to you. And thank you, Thalia. I really do appreciate that. If there's anything else, like I said, I will be posting this online within the next hour or so, and I will provide a link to the chamber. And if anything else I can say, I just appreciate it very much. I hope you all have a great holiday and a wonderful Christmas. Thank you, PJ. I appreciate it. And go out and have a great one. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Okay. Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.